Okta Essentials begins your journey in understanding the implementation and administration of the various product solutions that are offered by Okta. The training materials that are used for this course are copyrighted by Okta Incorporated. This is our disclaimer, so we want to make you aware that this training guide may include forward-looking statements, which are based on current expectations or estimates. These are subject to risks and uncertainties involving factors beyond Okta's control associated with developing and delivering new functionality. Okta Essentials provides system administrators with a foundation in understanding the configuration, deployment, and ongoing administration of the various solutions that are offered in the Okta Identity Cloud. In order to fully realize the capabilities of cloud computing, organizations need to have a way to easily create and manage users in multiple sources across the entire portfolio of applications. The challenges that IT professionals face are numerous. For example, first of all, being able to provide single sign-on capability across all of the applications that have been deployed within the enterprise. Secondly, being able to implement advanced security measures. Thirdly, being able to integrate with existing identity providers such as Microsoft Active Directory. And then fourthly, being able to manage users in a very fast-changing and dynamic environment without having to perform operations on a repeating basis in a manual fashion. We will address exactly how Okta is able to help you meet these challenges and others here in the Okta Essentials class. In order to successfully complete this course, you should meet certain minimum requirements. First, you should have completed the following on-demand courses: Identity and Access Management with Okta, an Introduction, and also an Introduction to Workforce Identity. We do anticipate that you have at least a basic familiarity with Microsoft Active Directory and also basic networking knowledge. This provides us with a list of the subjects that are covered in this course. First, we will begin by talking about defining users inside of Okta, one of the two required components for the implementation of Okta. Then we will immediately turn our attention to configuring or integrating external directories. There, we will show you exactly how Okta is able to bring Active Directory users, for example, into the Okta Identity Cloud. We'll then turn our attention to configuring groups, and there we will show you how to create and then a couple of different methods of populating groups. These groups are going to be used both in order to streamline the management of application assignment as well as in order to clearly define security policies for users that are accessing Okta as well as applications. We will then turn our attention to configuring single sign-on and provisioning, also known as user lifecycle management. We will then take a look at configuring custom application integrations, and in that lesson, we will show you how to connect applications to Okta that are not a part of our pre-built catalog of integrations, known as the Okta Integration Network. Then we will turn our attention to configuring Universal Directory. This is Okta's cloud-only directory, which will allow you to bring in attributes from any directory or from another application and then share that with other systems or applications. We're also going to show you how that you can transform those attributes that are associated with various applications so that they will be in an appropriate format for the receiving systems. We'll then talk about implementing the Okta policy framework. And in that lesson, we're going to show you exactly how we define password policies for users logging on to Okta. But in addition to that, we will look at adaptive multi-factor authentication, both what we call org-level MFA, which will be triggered when you're signing on to Okta, as well as application-level MFA, which will be triggered when accessing a specific application. We will then turn our focus to customizing Okta, where we will show you a number of different ways in which you can modify the appearance of the Okta end-user interface, perhaps in order to do branding or to aid in adoption of Okta. And then we'll talk about monitoring your Okta org, where we will focus on a number of troubleshooting and debugging tools and tactics, both inside as well as outside of Okta, and also talk about the important information that you should capture whenever you're opening a case with Okta support. Then we will finish up with the final activity, which we call the practical, which will bring together various concepts that you have learned going through the content of the class. Now, you will be provided with both a lab guide as well as recipes with regard to how you will go about completing the activities. So here we show you a list of the various solutions that are provided in the Okta Identity Cloud. However, before I talk briefly about each of those products, I want to back up a little bit and talk about the evolution of the cloud and the internet so that we can understand exactly how Okta fits into the bigger picture. I want you to be aware that the internet began as a project that the U.S. government became involved in because the Defense Department was interested in a networking architecture such that if a portion of the network was destroyed during wartime, the rest of the network could continue operating. It was called ARPANET, the Advanced Research Projects Network. That eventually grew and expanded to become a vast decentralized network, which is now spread all over the world of computers connected to one another using platform-independent industry standard protocols such as TCP/IP. However, it was not until about 1995 that major corporations en masse began to get on the internet and to make customer accounts available. However, I want you to know, as we saw the dot-com boom and the explosion in e-commerce, perhaps the very last industry sector to trust the internet in order to make customer accounts available was the financial services industry. For obvious reasons, banks and brokerage firms were not willing to trust the internet until security could be improved. And that's where Okta comes into the picture. Okta provides you with a reliable and secure platform not only for securing cloud-based applications, but on-premise applications as well. And the very first product solution offered by Okta was single sign-on. Single sign-on made it possible for our customers to be able to log into Okta and then not have to repeatedly have their employees enter user IDs and passwords in order to access the various applications that they use in order to do their jobs. In other words, a single electronic identity could actually be shared across multiple systems. There are several different methods of authentication that can be used with Okta's single sign-on. For example, you might be using SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language, or you could use WS Federation, or you could use OIDC, OpenID Connect. But then for applications that do not support a federated single sign-on protocol, Okta developed its very own solution, which is called Secure Web Authentication, or SWA for short. The next solution that you see represented here is User Lifecycle Management. I want you to be aware that not every application is going to support user lifecycle management. But for those that do, what this allows us to do is to automatically create a user profile inside of an application the moment that application is assigned to a user or a group of users. Now, typically, you think of user lifecycle management in the context of onboarding, where you hire a new employee, and of course, they need to have access to various applications to do their jobs. However, I want you to know that user lifecycle management does not simply encompass onboarding an employee, but it also encompasses updating the attributes associated with the user profile for that new employee as they change positions or departments within the organization, and then also deprovisioning that user when they leave the organization. One of the major challenges that large corporations have is user accounts that still have access to applications even after the individual employee has left the organization. With Okta's User Lifecycle Management, a single click can remove access to all of the applications that that user had access to, regardless to whether they were accessing from a wireless device or from a desktop workstation or a laptop computer. Next, we have adaptive multi-factor authentication. In the industry at large, you hear the term two-factor or second-factor authentication. However, we call this multi-factor authentication because you can actually set up more than two factors if you choose to do so. And we say that it's adaptive in the sense that we can capture information regarding how a user is accessing Okta and then use that as a basis for preventing access and presenting what we call an MFA challenge to a user when they attempt to log into Okta. However, we can also make MFA specific to particular applications. So, for example, each time a user attempts to log into Workday or Salesforce or Office 365, they can be presented with an MFA challenge depending upon where they're accessing that particular application from, or it might be based on who the user is, the group that they belong to, or it could also be based on the specific device that is being used to access Okta. Now, next we have Universal Directory, which is Okta's cloud-only directory, which essentially allows you to use Okta as a single source of truth for all of the attributes that describe user profiles accessing the various applications that you have deployed within the enterprise. And with Universal Directory, once we have represented an attribute brought in perhaps from an on-premise directory or from an application, we can then pivot or swivel and push or downstream that attribute to any system or application that may have a need for it. We also can transform, that is, change the format of the data associated with the attribute in order to accommodate the system to which we are sending that specific attribute. Next, we have advanced server access. All of those various applications that you have within the enterprise are hosted on a server somewhere. And I want you to be aware that advanced server access essentially extends Okta's framework as it pertains to security for identities to those servers that are hosting applications within the enterprise. But then, of course, also we have to think about cloud-based applications in addition to on-premise applications. And when we think about on-premise applications, then consider the next solution that we have in the Okta Identity Cloud, and that is Okta Access Gateway. I want you to know Okta's Access Gateway is our solution for SSO, that is single sign-on, to on-premise applications that you may have deployed within the enterprise. And then next we have API Access Management. With API Access Management, IT can now apply Okta's powerful policy framework to any API based on user profile or group membership, network zone, device, client, user, or administrator consent. And so what this means is that you can control who or what is executing the API's code. This really builds on using Okta as a platform. And then lastly, we have developer SDKs. These are tools that Okta provides our developers in order to help them write their own customized code faster. And there are software developers kits for the Python programming language, for Java. We have .NET SDKs for server-side integrations. So whether you want to create custom sign-on flow or create application connectors with OpenID Connect, these SDKs are essentially going to help developers get a head start on writing them.